fan of mazes? Anybody like mazes? Okay, a few. I'm a big fan of mazes. I've always loved mazes. There's lots of other activities and things around, and there always have been, but mazes, for some reason, for me, have always just been the best of the kinds of activities that are out there. Crossword puzzles, I could never do. I was never good enough at them. I never got the clues. I still don't. Dot to dots, when I was a kid, they were fun, but the newness just kind of wore off pretty quickly, and I just couldn't stick with it very long. Pattern activities, problem-solving activities, they were kind of fun, but nothing held my attention like mazes ever held my attention. I just loved that adventure of trying to get to the finish. And I think one of my favorite parts of the mazes was that when you go all the way around through the whole maze and you're getting so close to the finish, and then you hit a dead end. And you have to go all the way back and retrace your steps and try another path. And I was always happy and I was willing to do it because I just loved that potential of being able to get to the finish and work my way through the maze. Because the finish is always the best part. And to me, the finish was always just that epic part of doing a maze. Jesus told stories, many of which feel, I think, a lot like mazes. There's some confusion. There's some directions that don't seem quite right, and it seems like we're going one direction and we understand it, and then all of a sudden things change and we hit a dead end, and we have to retrace our steps and try to figure it out again and figure out how to get to the finish. The story we're going to look at today that Jesus told is, again, one of these maze kinds of stories. As we've been talking through all of these stories that Jesus does tell, we've talked about them in terms of them being epic stories. Epic in the sense that they relate to all of us. We're all able to connect with the stories that Jesus tells. These are Jesus' parables, and his parables are epic because they connect with each of us in some sort of a way or another. We can take some sort of a life-size lesson from these parables. But they also teach us things, these great things about God, about us, and about what our relationship with God looks like. So we're going to look at another of these epic stories, these parables today, and try to find our way through this maze. It's written in your bulletin, or you can follow along on the screen, and let's try to make our way through this maze. So Luke chapter 16. Jesus told this story to his disciples. There was a certain rich man who had a manager handling his affairs. One day a report came that the manager was wasting his employer's money. So the employer called him in and said, "What's this I hear about you? Get your report in order because you are going to be fired." The manager thought to himself, "How what? My boss has fired me. I don't have the strength to dig dishes, and I'm too proud to beg. I know how to ensure they'll have plenty of friends who will give me a home when I'm fired." So he invited each person who owed money to his employer to come and discuss the situation. He asked the first one, "How much do you owe him?" The man replied, "I owe him 800 gallons of olive oil." So the manager told him, "Take the bill and quickly change it to 400 gallons. "And how much do you owe my employer?" He asked the next man. "I owe him 1,000 bushels of wheat," was the reply. "Here," said the manager, "take the bill and change it to 800 bushels. The rich man had to admire the dishonest rascal for being so shrewd. And it is true that the children of this world are more shrewd in dealing with the world around them than are the children of the light. Here's the lesson. Use your worldly resources to benefit others and make friends. And when your earthly possessions are gone, they will welcome you to an eternal home." Does that feel like a maze to you? Maybe it doesn't to you. Maybe you're a lot smarter than me, but I've always thought this is just a maze. Because Jesus starts out talking about one thing, and then it seems like we hit a wall and we have to go back, and he starts talking about another thing. And he's talking about friends, and he's talking about money, and he's talking about employers and managers and relationships, and then he's talking about eternity, and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And there's not a straight line through this whole parable. So I think we need to make some sense of it. And at least the way I turn, when I want to make sense of something in the Bible that doesn't make sense, is I start with what I know. And there's a couple things that I think you do know in this parable. Something about God, something about us, something about this relationship that we have with God. So normally in parables, God is in the parable, and we are in the parable. And that's true here too. We could say that the employer, or the rich man, is God, and that we are the manager. Just like God, or just like the employer entrusts resources to the manager to care for, God entrusts resources to us that we can care for. And that's how God set it up since the beginning. God entrusted us with the world. God entrusted us with our lives. God entrusts us with all the resources and things we have. Our homes, our money, our cars, our education, our everything that we have. It's all a gift from God that God entrusts to us so that we can do something with it. So, God is the employer, we are the manager, and God entrusts things to us to care for. So as stewards or as managers of things, our job is to care for these. And one of the things that God tends to do is God tends to say, well, you need to do those things faithfully, and you need to do those things honestly. If I'm going to entrust something to you, you need to take care of it faithfully and honestly. And that's the way that the employer and the manager relationship was set up in this parable. So, did the manager care for the resources of his employer faithfully and honestly? According to Jesus' story, did he care for them faithfully and honestly? Yes? No. We got to know. We got to absolutely not. He did not. He did dishonest things. We don't know exactly what he did. All we know is he did not care for them in the way that he was hired to care for these things. So through this, we discover something specific about God. And I think we discover something about God's reaction and the way that God responds to all of this. We see that God has a certain reaction to this unfaithfulness and to this dishonesty that the manager has. So in the parable, the owner entrusts all these resources, and in our situation, God entrusts us with resources. And in both situations, God has high expectations for what we do and how we care for these resources. Jesus wants to make clear that God has big expectations for you and me for how we care for the things that God entrusts to us. So, that's God, and that's the groundwork of this. Now, the rest of the whole thing is all about us, and it's all about the manager. And the manager is an interesting guy, is he not? He's pretty conniving, he is pretty crafty, he's pretty creative in a lot of ways, and we find out, of course, in the beginning that he's quite dishonest. But we find out a lot about his motivation through what Jesus says. And he says this: the manager thought to himself, now what? My boss has fired me, I don't have the strength to dig dishes, I'm too proud to beg. And then the turning point. I know how to ensure that I'll have plenty of friends who will give me a home when I am fired. And then we start to see that this guy is pretty cunning, pretty crafty, pretty creative with what he's doing. And what is it that he does? He goes out and he takes these debts that these people have to his employer, and what does he do with them? He reduces them. One of them he reduces by 50%, the other one he reduces by 20%. That's pretty creative, because what is he gaining through all this? He's gaining the friendship of these people. He's gaining the allegiance of these people. He's creating a win-win type of situation. He, the manager, wins because he makes a friend, and the other people on the nets, they win because they don't have to pay as much money. The problem is, and this is what trips me up, doesn't this feel pretty selfish? I mean, doesn't this feel like he's thinking all about himself, and he's thinking only about his success and his situation? And what right does he have to be taking control of these resources that he's getting fired for? I mean, this seems like not only dishonest before, but now again dishonest now. I mean, there's layers of selfishness and dishonesty going on. And does God tend to teach us to be selfish, dishonest people? No. Does God teach us to think only about ourselves and our own situation? No. So what on earth is Jesus doing highlighting this dishonest, selfish guy as an example? for how to be in a relationship with God. That's what trips me. That's like a dead end in the maze. We got to go back and figure out our way through this whole thing. So, if that's the part that trips us up, let's look closely at Jesus' statement toward the end of this parable. He says, the rich man had to admire the dishonest rascal for being so shrewd. Dishonest. He's dishonest, and God, the employer, is admiring him for that. That doesn't add up. There's got to be another way. So let's think through it again. The rich man had to admire the dishonest rascal for being so shrewd. Does the rich man or the employer approve of the debt reductions, of the reduction in these debts that this man does? Yes? Does he approve of it? No. Okay, we got some no's. He seems to approve of it, does he not? He admires it. And if God admires something, that means he approves of it. That the guy's dishonest. Is he dishonest in the present moment of doing all these things? Or is he dishonest in the past? It seems like he's describing that he's dishonest in the past. And maybe now something has changed. But what could have changed? Because he's still doing dishonest things. So try this. Has anybody ever, or do you now have a job where you work on commission? Commission? No. Well, some of you have. I saw a few hands. Commission is that idea that you sell something, you sell a product or a service, and you put your income, your commission on top. What if this manager is simply taking away his commission from the debt? His commission in the first place was 50%. His commission in the second place was 20%. And all of a sudden, he's just sacrificing instead of being dishonest. If that's the case, then he was only dishonest in the past. He's no longer dishonest, and he's actually sacrificing and creating a good situation for himself with these people. He's being honest. He's developing a friendship. He's maybe even being generous. That's a possibility. So maybe we're on the right track, and let's keep going down that road. Because if that's the case, then maybe we can get a little closer to figuring out what it is that Jesus is saying through this. Because that seems faithful. That seems like an honest way to go. Don't charge the people more than they should be charged. Make a healthy situation for your employer on your way out the door. I mean, these are some potentially good things. So, move on to the next statement. The rich man had to admire the dishonest rascal for being so shrewd. And it is true that the children of this world are more shrewd in dealing with the world around them than are the children of light. What on earth does that have to do with anything? It's true that the children of this world are more shrewd in dealing with the world around them than are the children in this life. What is it that the employer admires the manager for? For being so shrewd. Shrewd? What does shrewd mean? Is it a good thing or a bad thing? It's actually a good thing. I mean, it means wise and driven and creative and clever. It means you see where you need to go and you're driven to do it. I mean, this guy was being admired because he had a problem. He was going to be fired, and he knew that he was not going to survive on his own. He needed to create a situation for himself that was good, and he needed to do it in an honest way. So he's being admired for being shrewd. So what is he shrewd, or what is he clever about? He's clever about dealing with this situation. And what is this situation? Being fired from his job and thinking ahead about what's coming, thinking ahead about his future. And if we are supposed to be the manager here, if we are the manager in the story, then what is it that our situation, what's at hand in our situation, that we could be shrewd about? Well, in the same way that this guy was planning ahead for his future, Jesus is calling us to be shrewd and clever about our own future. And this odd statement, it is true that the children of this world are more shrewd in dealing with the world around them than are the children of the light. It's a statement of fact that the people who are not followers of God are so clever about getting through life. They talk the right way. So here's the lesson. Jesus says, use your worldly resources to benefit others and make friends. Then, when your earthly resources are gone, they will welcome you to an eternal home. I've always thought that was weird. Anybody else think that was a strange statement? Like basically, take a bunch of people out to lunch and make good friends with them because somehow they're going to help you get into heaven? I mean, that's so backwards, is it not? That's like earning our way or milking our way or conniving our way into heaven. That does not make sense. But I don't think that's where Jesus is going. He's talking about the fact that the resources are all things that God entrusts to us. These are all things that God gives to us. And we can't take them with us. These are all things that we might be able to use. And in Jesus' world and in Jesus' day and in the Jewish world and the Jewish day, the way that they saw evidence that somebody was faithful and honest is by fruit of their labor or by producing something that demonstrated their faith. And demonstrations of their faith were benefiting others, serving others, and making friends, developing relationships. Those were ways of showing and proving that they were faithful people. So use the resources God has given us to demonstrate the faith that we have and the attention that we have on our future. In particular, our future relationship with God. Just before Thanksgiving, we began searching here at RiverCross Church for a family that we might be able to help during the Christmas season. And if you recall, we just asked church-wide, is there a family or are there several families that we might be able to help or serve during the holidays? That was just before Thanksgiving. And we really didn't come up with anybody in particular. And I'll say that was a little frustrating because we wanted to be able to serve some people. We wanted to be able to help, especially people who didn't quite have as much. Well, it was within a week of Christmas that we finally got a name. And we finally got word of a family whose kids attend the school who we could definitely help out. One of the daughter's teachers recommended that we might be able to serve this family. So we called them and we worked some of it out and we asked you, and many of you contributed to this. And on Christmas Eve, Sherry and I drove over to this family's house and we delivered some gifts on behalf of our church. And we had some conversation with the family. And it was a great chance to serve, albeit at the last minute, but it was a great chance to serve. So did we do that because we were trying to work our way into heaven? Did we do that because we just wanted our name in lights or we wanted to do something good to tell people about it? No, of course not. We did it because we wanted to serve, and it seemed like there wasn't an opportunity. And we got to serve. We got to use our resources to benefit others and to make friends. And as we do that, we're thinking not only about our own future and our own relationship with God, we're being able to bless somebody else, hopefully in their future and their relationship with God. God has high expectations for us, and his expectations that we're attentive to the future. And this is hard in the world we live in. I believe this is maybe one of the toughest times we should be thinking about our futures. Because there's certainly periods in life when we do, but so much of our culture points toward, let's just focus on, live for the moment. This life is now is the only life that really matters. Start living now because every breath is a gift. If you want to be peaceful, just live now. Even some authors, some old philosophers said things like this: with the past I have nothing to do, nor with the future. I live now. Anonymously, it was said, the past is a good place to visit, but I wouldn't want to live there. Seneca, the old philosopher, says, true happiness is to enjoy the present without anxious dependence upon the future. Ralph Waldo Emerson also wrote, write it on your heart that every day is the best day in the year. Einstein even said, life is a preparation for the future, and the best preparation for the future is to live as if there were none. And Marcus Aurelius said, confine yourself to the present. We have so much that's pointing toward just think now, just try to get through now, just live for now, just do the things that you need to do now, because now is all we have. And Jesus certainly speaks to now and living for now. But God is saying if that's all we're focused on, if we're not what God has in store for us, then we are not faithful and honest with the resources that God gives us. We must be attentive to our future. And that might be a future in terms of where our relationship with God is at. That might be calling us to do something new or to renew a commitment that we have to Christ. It might be acting differently or living differently or doing different things. This is a call to think ahead and think, who has God made me to be? And what does my future look like? Jesus does not just tell stories and tell stories. Jesus tells epic stories so that we might be changed and we might grow in our faith. So, may we live up to the expectations, the big expectations of God and be able to be as